Hi, everybody!
In the 90s, platformers, RPGs, and fighting games were the most oversaturated genre in gaming. I'd say fighting games effectively died out around 2003, as we were just getting too many of them and the quality was starting to vary wildly. Sure, the big boys were still going strong, but it was literally the law of diminishing returns. You even had some gaming outlets questioning if fighting games were dying. Clearly, they didn't die off, though they effectively went dark for a very long time. It was during the 7th generation we saw a small revival. That was mostly thanks to games like Street Fighter IV and its various iterations. You then had Killer Instinct in 2013, which did fairly well. After that point, though, fighting games disappeared for a while. Again. It was during the late portion of the 8th generation of consoles we saw fighting games coming back to a degree. Tekken 7 did very well. Soul Calibur 6 had a rough start, and you had a small explosion of tag fighters. Those ranged from Dragon Ball FighterZ, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, and BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle. You also had options from earlier in the generation, like Skullgirls Second Encore. After that, tag fighters basically disappeared again, until recently. First up, we're going to look at why tag fighters disappeared. Then we'll look at how they're returning in force, after which we'll break down why they might be the next trend in gaming, then why they might not be, after which you'll hear my opinion on the matter. To make your viewing experience easier, chapters will be used. But
no more foreplay.
So, why did tag fighters disappear? It comes down to fighting games being a smaller genre of game. Seriously, when you think back on the past 2 decades of gaming, what do you mostly see? In modern times, I'd say it'd be live service slop and the odd first-person shooter. In the mid-2000s, it was basically shooters, and wait for it, more bloody shooters! Fighting games were also in a bad state around that time, because developers had gotten lazy and were no longer innovating. There were exceptions, obviously, as Sega did keep innovating with Virtua Fighter. But as a whole, that style of game had stagnated, and the industry had seemingly moved on. After Street Fighter IV took hold, fighting games were suddenly cool again. But considering fighting games had effectively become a very small slice of the gaming industry, so too did its offshoot subgenres, making platform fighters and tag fighters disappear with them. Of course, you still had Marvel vs. Capcom, fulfilling a void in this time frame. However, when MVC Infinite failed to garner the audience both Capcom and Marvel hoped it would, the subgenre was effectively dead. Though Bandai Namco and Arc System Works held the fort down for a number of years, thanks to Dragon Ball FighterZ. It was when Marvel vs. Capcom disappeared that other developers started smelling blood in the water and wanted their own slice of the pie, leading to a lot of new projects being greenlit. So why do I say they're returning in force? Look no further than the recent summer showcases. During that time period, we got the announcements of Marvel Tokon and Invincible Versus. This also disregards projects we knew about previously, such as Hunter x Hunter Nen Impact, which releases next month, and 2XKO, which is expected out sometime this year. It also wouldn't surprise me if we hear about a couple other tag fighters in the very near future, given games take 3 to 5 years to develop on average. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite face-planted its way onto PC and consoles in the middle of 2017, so the vacuum left by Marvel vs. Capcom's disappearance has taken almost 7 years to fill. Talk about a delayed response. But will this delayed response actually lead to them maybe becoming the next big trend in gaming? Trends in gaming can be a little bit hard to predict, given it's a younger medium than, say, literature, television, or film. However, just like any medium, trends will be chased. We covered how fighting games were the big thing in the 90s, we've also covered how shooters were the thing in the mid-2000s, with the 2010s being dominated by free-to-play looter shooters and live service titles, which has been a poisoned pill in the 2020s. I have a video on that topic in the works, so subscribe if you're interested. However, since the bottom is falling out of the live service barrel already, what could potentially take its place? You could actually make a strong case for tag-based fighting games to be the next big thing, as they are learning from their traditional 1 versus 1 cousins. They need to simplify things if they want to be successful. As a whole, tag fighters have always appealed to a more casual audience, because of their spectacle. In tag fighters, you will often see circumstances where an infinite occurs. That's by design, usually. But the grandiose and over-the-top nature of tag fighters appeals to a more casual audience. It also has long been rumored that this upcoming batch of games will only feature simple controls, which can be a bit of a double-edged sword. For example, DNF Duel featured simple controls and didn't do anywhere near as well as people expected it to. I'm not saying simple controls was the straw that broke the camel's back, as the failure of DNF Duel was multifaceted, but I imagine it contributed a little bit. But these simpler controls are going to make these games more accessible, which means more people can try it out. So couple the accessibility, the stylish presentation, and the fact these are mostly licensed properties using well-established characters, and you have yourself a potentially winning formula. However, just because the recipe for a mainstream game is there, doesn't mean it'll necessarily be the case. Like I said in the last segment, trends can be difficult to predict. People really didn't expect fighting games to take off like they did. We have the second Street Fighter to thank for that. So what are some of the reasons tag fighters might not finally have their big day as a gaming trend? Mostly it'll come down to if these games can cultivate a lot of newcomers who become lifelong FGC members. There's always going to be a very small percentage from any demographic that'll convert to being a lifelong fan. Most will simply buy the game, try it out, and find fighting games aren't for them. You almost have to be a masochist to enjoy fighting games. Since the genre is so established, legacy players are always going to have a massive leg up on the newcomers. Also, when you consider those are the players newcomers will likely come up against more often than not, they'll get their shit kicked in, get discouraged, and blame the game. This not only discourages newcomers from sticking with the game, but it also discourages potential newcomers from picking up a title that might just become one of their all-time favorites. This is why fighting games are no longer the king of gaming, merely a small-time player on the grander stage. It's because of this newer fighting game IPs are few and far between, because they're a risky investment and the payoff is minimal when you weigh in those risks. Also, balancing a fighter is exceptionally hard. Look no further than some of the titles Matt McMuscles mentions in his Worst Fighting Games series. There's certainly a shit ton of stinkers out there. So where do I stand on the matter at hand? Tentatively, I think it's safe to say the chances of these fighting games suddenly making tag fighters super mainstream is virtually nil. However, gun to my head, I would say Marvel Tokon has the greatest chance of reaching that elusive mainstream audience, even if I feel like superheroes as a whole are becoming a tired genre. People still adore these characters, and for whatever reason, super visually striking games tickle something in our lizard brains that makes them go, "Me want, get thing." I also think Invisible Versus, despite being a budgeted title, has a significantly higher chance of breaking into the mainstream, considering that property has been super hot in recent years. And just look at how popular Omni-Man was in Mortal Kombat 1. He certainly helped to sell that season's pass at least. Ultimately, I think tag fighters are going to remain a hyper-niche subgenre of an already niche style of game, and that's no bad thing. You always need a counterculture movement with any form of media, and since gaming now makes more money than music or movies, it's high time the countercultures started to get fed just a little bit. But those were just my thoughts. Are you a fan of tag fighters? Let me know in the comments. Now check out one of my previous videos, and until next time, keep blazing that trail.